Oh, there's neat gleam in your eye. That doesn't look good.
Oh no, it's good. I go easy on you guys in level 4. It's level 9 you really got to worry about.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Um,
you brought 3 images. We'll
yep.
just we'll take a look at them in the Google community.
Okay.
And I'll do the screen share. And then basically what we're going to do is we'll take a look and hang on 1 second for me. Okay. We'll take a look at them, and then I just want you to grade them.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about what went into creating with them, what you were trying to do, any problems that you were having with it, and then you're going to give it a score on a scale of 1 to 3. So
Yep.
0 is, why the hell would I bring this to critique? That was a terrible idea. 1 is that, it shows promise. We can see where we were going, but we totally missed the mark because we were having trouble with something. 2 is that it's a good image, it's portfolio worthy, and 3 is exemplary, like best you have to offer at your current skill level.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay. Yep.
All right. So, okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about this image.
So very good friends of mine went to Biarritz in France on holiday and brought this back to us as a little present. And when I opened the packet, I thought, first of all, the colors are amazing, both the packaging and the macarons. And I wanted to, every once in a while, when I get something like this, usually food related, I want to do a little still life. So I went through the unboxing of it bit by bit and started taking pictures of it in various positions. What I wanted to do with this was to produce images which maybe are not traditionally sort of confectionery light, fluffy, airy pictures, quite photographic ones, but ones where they do stand out, that you can see the food and you want to pick one up and you want to bite into it.
Okay.
The reason I did a triptych here is because just one shot kind of didn't do it for me. So you had to do almost a little mini portfolio of 3 images to get the full effect.
Okay. How happy are you with this?
As I think as a still life, and as product of the images, if I was creating to a brief that included, we want something a little bit quirky, a little bit stand out, I would be pretty happy offering this up in the portfolio review with the client. So I'd probably give it a 2.
Okay. So I'm a big fan of the color punching, and people tease me all the time because all of mine sort of has a desaturated kind of feel, so they call it Lark sepia. So, but I'm actually really attracted to the more bold colors and the high saturation in this. I definitely think that it works as 3 images brought together. However, I do think that it would be probably stronger as 3 separate images where we would have the ability to appreciate them by themselves. The black lines for me are just a little bit distracting in the separation. So if we're going to keep it together as 3 separate images put together as a triptych, then I think thinner borders would probably work better. Okay. I love the light, and especially how it makes the ribbon pop and look 3-dimensional in the bottom too. I think it's just a little dark. I'd like to see just a little bit more of the light, specifically between these 2.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we lose most of the last row here. And part of that's because of the shadow being cast under the ribbon as well, but I think we probably could have punched it up just a little bit more with the light.
Yeah. So this was all natural light
Okay.
by a glass doorway which faces north. So it's a pretty consistent light.
Okay.
And it's a nice even light. When I first set this up, I did have a black. I think I had a white white reflector on the left, just softening the light, and I started off with a black reflector on the right, but that was too dark when I was reviewing the images. So this is just natural backfill. Okay.
My only other things that jump out at me, I'm not a huge fan of the brown like craft paper underneath here. I think if it had been solid on the blue, it'd probably have been a little stronger. It makes it look unfinished. And on the top one, I really wish that this wasn't covering their name.
Yeah.
Especially
both of those were compromises, because if in the top one, if you aligned it so you could see their name, then you couldn't appreciate the box so much, and it all became very rectangular.
Right.
You can see each image has some kind of angle to it. Maybe there's another positioning I could have played with for sure.
Or just pulling it off. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be completely on the blue either. I feel like we probably could have taken this and just shifted it over a little bit so that it was actually hanging off. But definitely, if you're doing product photography, at minimum, you want to make sure that the name is fully visible for the company.
Yeah.
And we do have it across the ribbon too, but it's so small, especially because of the fact that we stacked them on top of each other. So I don't want people that are potentially going to follow this to the company to be like leaning into the computer, squinting to try to read what it's from. So that's the only thing that I think becomes a fail for me is probably the top one. Because it's not showing any of the pastries, it's only showing the packaging. So
yeah, and then you don't have the name, so it's a bit difficult.
Yeah, so that's the only one. All that said, that's really nitpicking at it, and I don't actually know that the company would not be thrilled with it. I think of the three, that the bottom one is probably my favorite. But it competes a lot with the middle because I like the offset kind of feel. So I think the bottom one is probably the most traditional product photography as far as food goes.
Yeah.
Where we can appreciate all of the colors and all of the texture, and it's properly lit, but we still have the packaging. But I think together as a series, that having these to choose from would probably make them really happy. So I'll agree with you. It's definitely a very strong 2. I don't think it quite skirts over into the exceptional realm just yet, but it's definitely on its way.
Cool. All right. I'm happy with that.
Okay. All right. Tell me about this one.
So this one was the image I took on the spray and pray challenge. So I was a couple of weeks ago. I was in Chamonix, going down the Vallée Blanche, which is quite a long and challenging, not ski tour, but ski with guides, and you have to wear harnesses, take crampons to climb down arêtes, be careful of crevasse danger. It's a challenging environment, and in that kind of place, and you are, the only way to get out of here is by helicopter rescue, put it that way. And I was looking around. I chose that day for the spray and pray because I knew, it's an environment I'm very familiar with. I knew there was going to be some nice light, nice scenarios, nice situations, equipment shots, lots of people along the way struggling. And what I wanted to show was the experience of being in that kind of environment, of having to fight against nature. Now this was a nice sunny day. It was a little chilly. It was -14 Celsius and windy, but nevertheless, there is still route finding through here, dealing with the terrain, trying to find the safest way through while still dealing with the mountains and the weather is all kind of all a big package. So with this one, I'd actually just skied down this slope. The two figures in here weren't in our group, but I was looking up. I'm a big fan of backlighting in landscapes like this, because I think it makes it very three-dimensional as long as the exposure is right. So when I looked up here and I saw those two guys up there, I thought that is the shot, because you've got some nice positive space on the right, which is the big rock, the big bluff, showing and demonstrating kind of this is what they're trying to traverse. You've got the negative space on the left with the sun, and you've got the two tiny but very clear figures on a third line, bent over with what seems to be mist and wind whipping around them. The fact that I managed to capture them with both in exactly the same position is a complete coincidence, but it works really well.
I agree. I loved this one as soon as you posted it in the group. This is one of my favorites from you. I'm a huge fan of this sort of landscape journalism that puts humans in the midst of it and really scales down how little we actually are, because they're ants right now in the midst of all of this. And I think sometimes we feel bigger than we actually are in the world. So I like the juxtaposition of you know, these small spirits tackling the great mountain kind of thing. The texture is amazing. I love the variation between the soft wispiness of the clouds and the lightness, and then all of this great texture and gradation that we're getting in the lights and the shadows with the mountain itself, and then it washing back out. It's almost got like a water kind of feel to it. That I think is very visually appealing, pulling off of it. The only thing that grabs my attention that I don't necessarily think is a positive is this little sunbeam of light. And I think that it's easy enough that you could probably go in and retouch it out. But these specifically, because it's rimmed so hard, it keeps pulling my eye away from the people, which I think is distracting.
I'd agree with that. If you know, and I kept on looking at that. You know, it is in some ways. You know, this is a documentary shot. You know, the lens flare there is part of that. If I would take it one step further and say, okay, this is a fine art image, then absolutely, yeah, I would do that. I would touch it out. I did play around with cropping it out, but the balance of the picture then is thrown completely off because the sun's far too close to the left.
Right, I would agree with that. I don't think that you could crop it without destroying the balance, but I would say that it's easy enough to go in and probably retouch it out so you can keep the crop and the composition of it, but not have that grab you. And then really specifically, it's just these two. So even if we went in and just softened it a little, just so you didn't have, because it's the orange here that really grabs you, because it's the only orange anywhere in the image. Like it's a very cool kind of photograph to begin with. And this bright streak of orange, and because it's very linear where everything else is kind of flowing and bumping and swiffing, it's the angle and it's the color that really pulls it away. But still, I think it's a really incredible image. You kind of have this like peninsula vignette going on where it darkens up here, and it definitely darkens along the mountain and comes, and then lightens here because of the sun. And I kind of almost want to go in and just dodge just a little bit to just pull in the darkness here, because I feel like it's just a little uneven, but I think that's also something that I would probably go in and post and play with, and might decide that I like it better the way that it is.
Sorry, I couldn't see where you were pointing. Was that over on the rocks?
No, over right where the sunbeam is.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In that bottom corner, like you can see that, you know, you have these dark blues in the sky on the top left, and then it gets very dark along the cave and the rocks. And follows along most of the bottom, but because of the position of the sun in that bottom corner, it lightens up right there. So I might go in and just darken like just along the bottom edge of the left bottom corner. But I think that we might end up going back as soon as we do that and go, now is better before. Either way, I think that this is a beautiful image. I think this is definitely wall worthy. This would be my pick for your intro image on your website and social media. Like this would be my banner photo for you. This would be the first image they see on your website. Like this is one of your best pieces that I've seen so far. If I wanted to impress people with you, this is the image I would show them. So this gets a 3 in my book.
Thank you very much.
Okay, tell me about this one.
So the third image is, it's not flicked forward yet.
Oh, it hasn't for you?
There we go. So the third image, the guy on the left is my brother-in-law, Philip Shepard, and a few years ago he was one of the main inspirations for pushing my photography, because I'd been an amateur but family photographer for a few years, He's a composer and performer, and he asked me to document a new series of what he called not so silent films, which are old comedy films, so the 1920s silent shorts, but with a band of amazing musicians who come along and improv a soundtrack to the film.
Okay.
And so I went and did all of the setup, the backstage, and basically did a full documentary shoot on each event, which has been a load of fun, and it's pushed me enormously to be comfortable with equipment, push the margins of what's possible in camera and in Lightroom, and then go one step further and try and start seeing the emotions, anticipating the moment, capturing that time. So when we have time, I ask the performers if we can do a little pre-gig band photo, and this was at the back of the venue, which is a cinema with these amazing seats all the way through. So you go in, it has waiter service to the tables. It's a really cool place. They just sat there, and I said, okay, guys, just interact, mess around. They were all very comfortable with each other, except for because the top three figures all know each other and have played with each other before. The guy on the bottom, it was his first time, and he was nervous as hell.
Okay.
Despite the fact he is, sort of Grammy-winning composer and writer. Suddenly these moments came through when they decided to go very over the top. He flopped over onto this. Philip leant into him, giving him CPR, and then suddenly there were these 2-3 frames where they were in these positions and just messing around with each other and acting towards the camera. This one was the one that really popped out to me.
Okay.
Each guy's got a great expression on their face. The woman on the right is looking absolutely beautiful, as it happens, with the lighting just right for her face. Everyone's got a different expression, and there's a great sort of dynamic and flow around the picture for me.
Okay. How would you rate this one?
I would give it a high 2, because with the benefit of observing a few of your critiques and looking at other people's work, I think there are things I would improve here. It was a grab shot using a single on-camera flash bounced off the ceiling, which I had shrouded, so it was only shooting up to the ceiling, and as a result, all their eyes are in shadow. There's actually no little spark in their eyes. The darks are too dark. I made a conscious decision there, because the moment I started lighting them up, and I've only used Lightroom up till now, all the reds started exploding as well in the rest of the image and dominating it. So I would try and get a little better contrast there, because otherwise you're losing an awful lot of definition across all their clothing.
Okay.
And I think one of the other cohort members rightly pointed out, there's this great big grey speaker above the top figure's head, which you could shop out easily.
Yes. Okay. Well, you hit on most of the things that I'm gonna touch on as well. I do agree with you. The expressions are great. There's lots of good energy, and the energy will sell the image more than technical precision 9 times out of 10. Mm-hmm. Eyes sell it with the portraits all the time. So the fact that we really don't get any definition into their eyes is a problem for me. That's probably your biggest check mark in the negative category. You do lose a lot of the detail and shadows. You can't see the separation between her legs until you get to the ankles here. Yep. I had to actually turn the brightness up on my screen because I have mine set for print standards, so the light behind is low. So it's real. I think this would print really dark, which is a problem if you're doing promo shots where they're going to be using them on any kind of materials. These two completely blend into each other with the front of his jacket and into the back of his suit. We lose all of that. They just become sort of a darkened blob. So the dark really has to go. The reds will be the first colors that start looking a bit neon and punchy when you're dodging and burning and pulling out shadows and lightening them up. But you can also counteract that in post. So some of that's just it's just play and experience. Like the more you do it, the more you'll you'll understand how to do it without compromising the color quality. And I can show you some tips on that if you want next time we do a critique. The speaker would definitely go. It ruins the ambiance of the room. I do like the dynamic of all of them in relation to each other. It's very well composed as a group photo, and it's one of the rare instances where them breaking the fourth wall and connecting with you is actually their connection to each other. Because usually when you're doing group photos, you want interaction. Like these two are obviously interacting with each other. But these two are separate, and usually that's a no-no because it severs them from each other, but their connecting is actually connecting with you. And the fact that he's not, because he's obviously dead, is okay because he anchors him into that shot, so it works. So I think that was exceptionally well done. And despite the shadows in the eyes being a big turnoff for me, and the shadows being a little harsh in the face, particularly around like the grin lines in the cheek, they're pretty deep set because of the shadows, because of the overhead light. But I still think it's a really good photo. I still think it would be one that the clients would be like, we definitely want that one when they were picking them out. So it's a 2 for me. I don't know if it would make a high 2. I think there's enough little mistakes that could have been caught and should have been set correctly as far as the exposure and the shadows before you got this moment.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because the lighting here in this venue is horrible. The entire place is lit with incandescent lamps or tungsten lamps, so your average household bulb, and the walls are painted cream, the furniture is red, the ceiling is off-white, but it's a very high ceiling. So take any images here without fill-in flash, you get just these muddy tones which are very, very difficult to correct for afterwards. And having done one shoot there, I next time round, this was the second shoot I'd done in the venue, I deliberately took everything was flash with just enough dialed in so it didn't overpower the ambient, but that you got a good amount of decent quality lighting to their faces. And I'd spent quite a bit of time actually before this little mini shoot doing test shots of this corner to make sure I had the right balance of reflected light with the ambient light from these lamps. It was a compromise.
It is, and that's always the trade-off when you're talking to someone that does a lot of event photography, so I can totally agree with you there. I'm going to actually rock your world. Give me a second.
Okay.
And I will save you from that problem, because I had that problem too. So, let me turn off screen sharing. Okay, so these are one of my favorites. They are about $10 to $15 a piece. You can get them shipped worldwide, and they're Lusana, Lusana. These are slave flashes, and they plug into any lamp.
Right.
So if you had these both plugged into the 2 lamps that were behind them, then it would have lit the room, but it would still give you the illusion of having the ambient light. So you'll notice in a lot, if you go to my website and look at a lot of the boudoir, that there's lamps, and they're always like, oh, you're so good at getting your studio lights to look like the light source is coming from the lamp. It's because it is.
It's because you're cheating.
Yeah, so, and they're so cheap. So you can have your on-camera flash if you want to have like the hot shoe for fill light in the front, that's fine. But if not, then you can hook up any kind of trigger to the front of your camera, and these all operate off of slaves. And they're like, because you can pick up like 4 or 6 of them for like $50. It's like one of the cheapest lighting tricks that will make a huge difference in what you're doing. So they completely revolutionized the way that I shot, and I got them in this like super cheap like eBay lighting kit, and then I couldn't find them anywhere. And as far as I know, Lusana is the only one that does them. I haven't found them anywhere else. but they'll plug into any light fixture. So they're really good when you're working at places that you can't necessarily bring in a ton of lights or you don't want them there. I've done them at different events and weddings where they have like ambient light on the tables, or they'll have like wall sconces and lamps at the venues and stuff when I was doing weddings. And I would just go in and talk to the wedding planner and be like, look, I'm going to unscrew your light bulbs and put some of my lights in, but you're not going to have any lights for anyone to trip over then. And they're like, oh my God, that's so great.
Okay.
So Lusana, go look them up, and that might help you with that, just to create a little more pop. And then you can sit and you can play with it too.
Because if I had that, I'm just thinking, if I had that, then I would have been able to unshroud the on-camera flash and have a little bit of light bleeding forward, and then that would have made both lifted the shadows and popped the eyes.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's probably my single best like cheap lighting trick, which I'm not allowed to give anymore because I just got sponsored by a lighting company. But but that one saves me a lot from big venues like that. That just, you know, they're beautiful venues. Like that's a great place to shoot when you're looking at the location. And the problem is clients never look at the light; they look at the background. So they'll be like, oh, we have this big, beautiful theater. And they never think for a second that the fact that it's all like mahogany ceilings 50 feet up is going to make it difficult for you. So that might help. But all in all, like each of these images are really good by themselves. You're in solid 2s, which is good. That's a good place to be. There's still lots of room for improvement to excellence, but you have a strong portfolio.
Thank you.
So the biggest problem that I'm seeing is that there's not consistency through your work. So you brought, you brought essentially product or food photography, and then you had this epic, beautiful, like landscape out in the elements. And then you had this sort of like portrait meets advertising kind of work, and they're very, very different genres. And so they're getting very different treatment from you in the way that you're shooting and in post. So I would never pick those 3 images as belonging to the same photographer.
Right.
So, so let's talk a little bit about what you're doing and where you want to go and what you'd love to shoot and how to sort of bring all that in together so that people can recognize that as, and be like, oh, I bet you that's a Julian image.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm still at the level of this is a great hobby. This is a creative side of me that I don't have anywhere else in my life. I'm by profession, I'm an investment banker. So for me, it's the opportunity to say, okay, how can I be as good as possible at each of the things that I'm trying? And I haven't yet worked out. I mean, 2 things. First of all, I'm not doing this professionally, so I'm not having to decide what will I focus on to maximize my revenue and create the best portfolio. And the second thing is I quite like having the variety of challenge to myself, because I see the challenges of doing the still life food photography as being very different to the event type photography. And portraits again is something I would probably love to do more of, but I've not given myself the opportunity to do that. Where I go with my photography, I don't know, which is tough. I think if I was looking at taking this further professionally, then yeah, I'd have to be making some pretty quick decisions.
Not necessarily. I'm not of the mindset that you have to choose which one as much as which one first. But I do also think that it depends. So I guess the first question is there part of you that considers the want to make this a career move, or are you happy with this just being a hobby and something that you do and you have your job? Because that's perfectly fine too.
Yeah, for me, this is going to be a hobby, but an extremely serious hobby. So when I've on the strength of the images that people have seen, I've been asked to do, for instance, other event photography, or clients have bought prints on spec, and so it's kind of shading into the commercial side, but for me, it's much more about the artistic development that I want, within the Arcanum, that this is exactly what I want to do, is work out where I am as an artist rather than as a professional photographer.
Okay. So the next couple of levels then, at least for the foundation, we're focused more on the artistry than we are anything that has to do with business or professionalism or marketing, because it's more about just the creativity for you. So you don't care if anybody knows your name ever?
No, not yet. But
okay,
you know,
that's good.
Yeah, but if in 10 years' time, I suddenly say, okay, I'm done with banking. I'm changing tack entirely. I'm going to be an adventure photographer. I'd want to have, a body of work out there to say, look, this is what I can do, rather than starting completely from scratch.
Okay. So what is it that you would like to see happen between now and level 20?
I would like to see me using light much more carefully, and that's probably part of that is in camera, but it's probably a lot more is as I've said, I've only used Lightroom up till now. Photoshop for me is a complete unknown.
Okay.
And I know that there are, even just in the images we've discussed, there are quite a few things that are probably Photoshopable, which in Lightroom would be difficult or impossible.
Yes.
So that for me is one of the challenges I'm going to set myself, and maybe for the next, for the next level, I will actually go and work on the mountain image and correct that little lens flare.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great, very small challenge as far as the image at whole, and what's behind it isn't very intricate, so it should be a good one for you to learn from. Just make sure you're learning on a copy and not the original. And it would actually be really good too. Lightroom for me, I rarely use it. For me, Lightroom is essentially Photoshop with training wheels. So it's a lot of, and that's not like a negative thing. Like it's really great for when you're doing large batch edits. And when you're going through images that you just want to put your touch on, but that you don't necessarily have as a masterpiece. So for me, when I shoot, for a client, I'm shooting usually for like a 20 image box, or when I would shoot weddings and I would return, several hundred images from the day, there would be 3 to 5 that would be, 3 to 5 images that would be the fine art kind of images, that would be the ones that I wanted them to buy as wall prints. Those ones I would pull into Photoshop and really take the time to mold. The rest of them I just want to go in and touch. So I don't need to pull them individually. Lightroom's great for that. But you should definitely have a working knowledge of both. So having one that you can go, sorry. Hey, my office assistant. Having one that you can go through and just kind of play with Photoshop and learn. Photoshop's going to give you a lot more technical precision with everything that you're doing in it, and a lot more tools that you just don't really have the ability to play with in Lightroom. And every time I'm talking about retouching or teaching, I'm doing it in Photoshop, not Lightroom. So
yeah, no, I've seen that. And certainly I'm posting up on most of my public images are on Flickr, and more increasingly I'm being very selective what I'm putting up there. So if I'm making that conscious move into being incredibly selective, and therefore can invest the time in treating them like fine art, whatever the genre, then yeah, it would make sense to be spending the time on them in Photoshop rather than an hour in Lightroom.
Yeah, I think there's, and I can't remember which master does it, but there are quite a few impressive series of tutorials for Lightroom as well. I'm definitely not your guru for that. 90% of the images that you see from me are in Photoshop. That's pretty much primarily what I use.
To be honest, so for me the challenge is moving further on into Photoshop.
Okay, good. Well, then that I can definitely help with. Sure. I'm totally fine with you exploring a bunch of genres, especially if this isn't your bread and butter. I think a lot of people feel like making money from it creates this validation, but like you don't have to. Like, you get to spend your time however you want to. So if you have a good job doing something that you enjoy doing right now, or at least something that pays well enough that you don't care if you enjoy it or not, then absolutely you should be spending the rest of the time doing something that you love doing. So I'm fine with you continuing to hone your craft. My concern would be that I feel like if I did product photography, and then I did pet portraits, and then I did a wedding, and then I did boudoir, and then I went out and shot landscapes, that you would still be able to see my voice and my style and the way that I shoot kind of come through all of those. So for me, one of the easiest ways to develop that, I think, is actually focusing on one genre for a little bit until you start to develop a consistent style, and then branching out to the next one. So I would still like to see that, even if when you come to, you know, level 19 critique, that you're bringing product and landscape and portraits and whatever else, that I can tell that they're your images. I want something that shows me that they're yours, because they're all good, but I can't tell that they're yours. And the problem with me not being able to tell that they're yours means that they could belong to anyone. You know, so when people come and they hire me, it's because nobody else has my style. So if they like that style, they have to book me. And it's the same thing, even if it's a hobby for you. If there's any part of you that's like, I want to put these up as fine art images people can buy, or I just want people to see them. You know, because most artists create so that other people can see and connect to them. So whatever that's going to be, it's going to be easier for you to build your following, and easier for other people to become fans of your work. Otherwise, what's the point of sharing them out? So that's going to be probably my push for you for the next couple of levels, is just figuring out exactly what your style is. One of the easiest ways for you to do that may be to actually go look at some other people's work. So if you were to go on Pinterest, that's a really easy one for creating inspiration boards. But if you were to go look, and you could create, you can do collections on Flickr too, can't you? Like different people you follow, you can save images.
Favorite, but it's, and create collections around them.
Okay, so that's a fine option too, but just going in and figuring out for yourself what creates exceptional images. So if you put together a collection of 50, and they can be across the board in all kinds of different genres, but just images that really, really move you visually. And then you can look at them and kind of figure out what it is that's speaking to you. Like, is the lighting like the be all end all, and all 50 of them just have stellar lighting throughout them? Or is there commonalities in the fact, like you said, you really like backlit landscapes? Are you noticing that the ones that you're picking, you know, that 90% of them are backlit, and it has to, again, do with lighting? Or is it, you know, whatever it is that moves you, you'll start to find these common threads. And you'll start to find them through different genres that are seemingly unconnected, which I think will help you kind of define what speaks to you, which will be what you want to learn, which will be what speaks to other people about your work. So then we'll have a more focused idea on what we want you to really work on perfecting from an artistic standpoint.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So how are you feeling? You actually got off pretty easy. You brought pretty good work.
I was hopeful, but yeah, each of them have issues, but within the limitations of what I felt I was able to do now, I thought they were pretty good work. But yeah, all of them, you know, none of them are super refined, polished, professional level shots yet. But they're getting there.
Okay. Sure. So moving forward, what's going to make it worthwhile for the time, the energy, and the money you're investing to go forward for the next 14 levels of the Arcanum? What is it that you're looking to get out of it?
I think, first of all, getting consistency of style. You know, whether that be actually refining it down into or focusing on a single genre and developing a style within that, or more broadly, working out what are the elements of the style that I can use in various genres. And that may well then say, okay, I'm not going to do any more of the still life. I might do it for fun, because there's, you know, it's completely controlled elements, and at the end I kind of enjoy doing that. But I also want to make sure that I get to a position where every image I publish, I'm 100% happy with.
Okay.
It means less images, and that may involve going more the fine art route.
Okay. I think those are good goals. What is it that I can help with?
I think initially it's going to be pushing me on using Photoshop to refine these images as they come along.
Awesome. From now on, any images.
I know I'm not allowed to use Lightroom.
Yes.
But
God, I'm so good at this.
Oh, this one's going to be easy for you. And but then if you see a style developing, then please pick up on that, because I'm going to need that external commentary as much as sort of what my internal voice is telling me.
Okay. Well, I think from what I've seen you post in the group so far and what you brought to critique, you do have an inherent understanding of lighting. We may have missed the mark slightly, like we're still, getting the information in the shadows, but you understand where the light should be, which is one of the hardest things to teach if somebody doesn't have a natural vision for that. That's one of the hardest ones that I spend a lot of time like really honing in on. So the fact that you have that is awesome, because now it's just sort of fine tuning, but knowing where the light should be and what makes for a good image, because light is everything. It's, it's photography. It's literally light writing. So I think that you're off to a good start. And I think that most of the potency in your images is coming from the light. So I think while we can definitely work on Photoshop, that just continuing to make sure that you're looking for the light while you're shooting and making that the priority in camera is going to be part of your style. Like you're going to be one of the photographers that at least half, if not more, of your personal style is actually from you creating in camera, and then the rest of it's just going to be accentuated in post, which will all be Photoshop.
Cool.
So I don't think that you necessarily have to do every image from here on out in Photoshop, but what I would like you to do is every time you share an image in the group from now on, just put like LR or PS with the post so that I know what you're using. Because that'll also give me a little more freedom to beat on you a little harder, because you're pretty proficient with Lightroom. So I'll be tougher on you with those images. And then I'll also know that if I'm catching anything in the post and you're doing it in Photoshop, that's good content for me to do classes or something on, or go over with you in recorded ones. So how are you feeling? I'm
feeling pretty good. As you said, you were pretty easy on me.
Yeah, don't worry, it gets harder.
That's why I'm here.
Okay. Well, I am going to stop the broadcast. You passed with flying colors. Welcome to level 5.